Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name's Lisa Chogyal, and I'm here to introduce the star speaker of the evening. As a long-term resident of Nepal, Cristeena's father and Mrs. Chitrakar's husband, Kiran Chitrakar, the patriarch of the Chitrakar family, approached me now quite a number of years ago to help with compiling this book, a book that would capture and record his family collection of images and paintings over the century. It never occurred to me when he asked me to edit it and put it together, it never occurred to me to hesitate. I accepted with enthusiasm and have certainly never regretted that decision. It seemed to me important that the extraordinary Chitrakar collection of photographs of Nepal's bygone ages be accessible for a wider audience. It's been an honor to work with the family over the past years, since 2016, when we got going, especially with Cristeena, who became the principal driver and writer, and her brother and Kiran's son, Swaraj, who's not here tonight, who worked with digitizing all the images. And Sarita, the backbone of the family, is with us this evening. In my role as mentor and editor, I think they will agree with me that the preparation of this book had its moments, high and low points, and frustrations caused by delay, not least of all, of course, by the pandemic. The book was more or less finished exactly when the COVID hit. And for various reasons, Kiran wasn't able to arrange the launch until 1st of September last year. So it was quite a frustrating delay. We had a glittering event that some of you were at, maybe just the three of us were at, and Mark Watson. We had a glittering event amidst the Rana grandeur of the Yakinyeti Hotel in Kathmandu. Over many meetings and coffees, the family led the photo selection, which was a huge job and which Cristeena will tell you more about. The aim was to use pictures that went beyond the iconic Rana rulers and their history and their finery to portray the realities of daily life and ordinary people of Nepal in the past. We had to whittle down the many thousands of images to what you see in this book today. As you can imagine, it was heartbreaking to have to decide what to leave out. We were all keen to support these important historic images with the highest quality writing, academic but fresh and readable. Several of the older Nepali academics weren't available to help us. I persuaded Cristeena to step up as one of the main authors, which she did with alacrity, along with the distinguished Professor David Gellner, who I hope is with us online, if not in person, Professor of Social Anthropology from All Souls, Oxford, and Dr. Mark Watson, historian and botanist from the Royal Botanic Gardens, Edinburgh, who is about to be with us tonight on his way. In fact, it would have been the first time that we were all in the room together, but we still haven't all been in the same room together. It hasn't stopped us producing this book. Vajra Books Kathmandu organised the distribution and were involved from the beginning. The Royal Botanic Gardens Edinburgh provided help with book design by Caroline Muir, and we also had support from UNESCO and, of course, the Dirgha Man and Ganesh Man Chitrakar Foundation we're most grateful for their assistance. What you see before you, available for sale after the talk, is the result of a labour of love that came together over the past 6 years with a great deal of work from a great many people. And I'm immensely proud and honoured to have been part of that. We believe Kiran's book will take its place as a significant addition to Nepal's compendium of arts, heritage and cultural volumes. And I know that you will really enjoy hearing from Cristeena this evening, who is the real powerhouse behind the publication. So it's my great pleasure and honor to hand over to Cristeena for her presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Good evening, everyone. I'm happy and grateful for you all for taking time to attend this book talk and exhibition of Nepal Remembered historical images from Dirgha Man and Ganesh Man Chitrakar. It gives me immense pleasure to be here talking about the images that my great-grandfather and grandfather have created. And this book holds historical value, but is also very sentimental to my family. I grew up around these photographs, and I always wanted to understand the stories of the people, the places, and the history of the photographs as seen through the lens of my family. And I thought, what better way to do it than in a book? The conception of the book started in 2015 when we received a grant from the British Library's Endangered Archives program. Realizing the importance of the collection after the devastating earthquake of 2015, it was fundamental for us to digitize the glass plate negatives. My brother, father, and I worked on digitizing and cataloging for 3 years. And along with Lisa, we spent about 5 years, almost 6 years, selecting about 200 images out of 5,000 to go in the book. In the process, I've learned a lot about my family, about my history, and about my culture. For the talk and exhibition today, I have selected images from the book that give a general overview of the collection with a focus on the long-standing relation between Nepal and the UK and how art and architecture produced during the mid-1800s to 1900s was inspired from Europe, more specifically from the British and India. Chitrakar literally translates to painter, and we have been artists working for the palaces since the 18th century. This is a watercolor of Dirgha Man Chitrakar and his wife Lani Thaku, my great-grandparents, and it was painted by my grandfather, Ganesh Man Chitrakar, in the mid-1900s. So Dirgha Man was known to be a very talented painter from a very young age. And the story goes that when his brother was ill, he asked the royal physician for help. And as a gratitude, he presented the royal physician with a painted medallion of goddess Durga. And it happened, the Prime Minister Chandra Samshar happened to notice that medallion and immediately hired Dirgha Man Chitrakar because the painting was so good. So although this book is primarily a photo book, I thought that it was very important to include a few paintings to show our heritage as painters. And it also highlights our evolution from painters and to photographers. This is Dirgha Man's painting box. It was produced by Reeves and Sons from the late 1800s. It contains brushes, gold pigments, gold powder, stone pigments, and other accessories. So this is a hand-drawn concertina folded manuscript, which was used by artists as a reference book. So, and based on this, the artists would then add colors and embellishments. This is a painting of a prominent court figure, possibly of Matpur Singh Thapa, who served as Prime Minister and Commander-in-Chief of the Nepal Army from 1843 to 1845. The man is an important personage as the headdress was only worn by prime ministers or high-ranking officials. What I personally find interesting and unique about most of the paintings in our collection is that they're incomplete. And as artists, when as artists, like when they would finish the paintings, they would be handed over to the patrons. So whatever was left behind, they are unfinished. And why it was left abandoned, I mean, we'll never know. But there's a beauty in its imperfections because you can see the strokes and sort of the different layering of the painting. So this is Prime Minister Janga Bahadur Rana and his wife, Bada Maharani Hiranya Garbha Kumari. This photograph was taken around 1870s and probably one of the first photographs taken in Nepal. Through guile and bloodshed, Janga Bahadur captured power from the Shah kings and appointed himself as prime minister in 1846. He was the first Rana Prime Minister, and this started 100 years of fraternal succession as Rana Prime Ministers. The kings were ceremonial heads, but had no actual power. Understanding that good relation with the British was critical for political survival and Nepal's sovereignty. So Prime Minister Janga Bahadur in 1850 set out on a journey to England and France. This visit became the cornerstone of his relationship with the British and paved way for many other negotiations with British India. Prime Minister Chandra Samsher, who came to power in 1901 and was the second Prime Minister to visit England in 1908. This image is of Prime Minister Chandra Samsher on his entourage taken during their visit to England. He was honored the title Grand Cross of the Order of Bath and was conferred an honorary degree, Doctor of Civil Laws, by the University of Oxford. Along with the prime ministers are his brothers and ministers, whom he brought on the trip to keep a close eye on any potential adversaries. Prime Minister Chandra Samsher was the longest ruling prime minister and was the one who promoted and institutionalized photography. After employing Dirgha Man Chitrakar, the prime minister set up a studio in his palace in Singhadarbar. During his 29-year rule, he abolished slavery, built Nepal's first higher education system, developed the country's infrastructure, and ran the first railway service from Raxaul to Amlekhganj, all of which were visually documented and included in the book. Photography became a norm. It was a preferred medium as it was easier to document than a painting. All state and official functions, ambassadorial and foreign dignitary visits, and Tarai hunting parties were recorded in photographs. Recording events was not only important in Nepal, but also when he traveled. And when he went to England, he took Dirgha Man to document his travels. This is a picture of this is a picture at Marseille docks in France, and the man in the center wearing the white trouser is Dirgha Man Chitrakar. And the interesting thing about this photograph is that the man in the foreground, you can see him carrying 2 pots of water. They're called gagris. And they actually brought 400 gagris of water to England because it was forbidden to drink water touched by beef eaters. From England, Dirgha Man brought a camera, which he used for the majority of life, documenting Prime Minister Chandra Samsher and subsequent prime ministers, their achievements, families, ceremonies, and palaces. So following his return from Europe, Prime Minister Chandra Samsher held a great public feast on the army parade ground. It was believed that touching beef eaters and crossing the seas was impure. So on his way back from Europe, they stopped in Banaras, India, and performed purification rituals. The consumption of this feast by the public signifies acceptance of those purification rituals. The Prime Minister was aware that British approval was critical to his rule, as proven once before. This visit ensured the support of neighboring British India and paved the way for many other negotiations. One key area of diplomatic exchange was the Gurkha soldiers, Nepali fighting men serving in the British Army, which is a tradition that continues today. They have fought in many wars from both the World Wars to the Falklands and more recently in Afghanistan. In the Nepal-Britain Treaty in 1923, the Ranas astutely negotiated the provision of soldiers in exchange for tolerance of their independence, restoration of territory, honors and titles, money, and arms and munitions. This is Prime Minister Chandra Samsher with his brothers and high officials on the steps of Singhadarbar. This image shows the number of numbers involved. Out of a population of 5 million, about 200,000 Nepalis are estimated to have left the country for military purposes. This is a Gurkha man holding the British and Nepali flags. And this is an image of His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, later King Edward VIII, and Prime Minister Chandra Samsher inspecting the Guard of Honor during a hunting trip in 1921. Chitwan was famed as one of the best hunting grounds on the subcontinent, and became a popular venue for meetings between the Rana rulers and foreign dignitaries. Prime Minister Chandra Samsher was a shrewd ruler, and he wanted to prevent the prince from meeting the Shah king, as he believed that it would evoke sentimental feelings in him and lead to an increase in the king's authority. He arranged a hunt in Chitwan, and the prince never reached Kathmandu to meet the king. This is Lord and Lady Mountbatten with Prime Minister Padma Samsher in Singadarar in 1945. Lord Mountbatten's daughter is sitting on the far left. And to the right of Lord Mountbatten is Field Marshal Kesar Samsher, who was the ambassador to UK. And dignitary visits such as these were meant to strengthen ties with Britain. This is the princesses and wives of the royal and Rana family, and they're ornately dressed and wearing exquisite jewelry. So the Ranas indulged in lavish lifestyle, enriched with art, painting, and photography. Paintings commissioned during the Rana period were elaborate and life-sized, displayed in golden and silver frames. When photography was introduced, the production of images became easier and less time-consuming. Furthermore, it promoted an increased consumption of luxury items that were used as props in photographs. Clothes and lavish jewelry were flaunted. Both Rana men and women wore the finest clothes, profusely decorated with pearls, jewels, sequins, and intricate embroidery. Women's headdresses were extravagantly adorned with diamonds, pearls, and other gems, and they wore ornate rings, necklaces, and brooches. The finest crystalware and chandeliers were put on display, and enormous palaces and manicured gardens were photographed. These images were then hung on the palace walls. Photo albums were created and circulated among friends and families. Painting and photography were flaunted as a vehicle of display, seeing and being seen within the Rana family. Photography played a central role in the Rana's constant and obsessive demonstration of wealth and power. Photography and painting becomes another pursuit of diplomacy, where these ideas could be cemented with imagery. By emulating the British, the objective was to be seen as their equal, and not only in costumes and architecture. The Ranas engaged in worldly conversations by opening libraries containing books on all topics. Western scholars were invited to visit, and books written by prominent Western writers were featured in photographs. This is a photograph of Singha Samsher wearing a kilt, posing with the 2 volumes of Living Races of Mankind, a popular illustrated account of the customs, habits, pursuits, feasts, and ceremonies of the races of mankind throughout the world, written by H.N. Hutchinson and published in 1900s. Portraits of kings, prime ministers, and their families were modeled on European styles. Women wore saris draped to emulate crinoline dresses, and men sported ceremonial military uniforms. Backdrops were painted with Victorian interiors and exteriors, and European accoutrements such as pedestals and bird cages were popular. This is Prime Minister Chandra Samsher with his second wife and 2 sons. The one on the right is General Vishnu, and the one on the left is General Sankar. The painted backdrop is of a Victorian interior, and it's still in my family's collection. Although the intent of both the trips to Britain in 1850 and 1908 was to appease and pledge loyalty to the British Empire and to ensure that Nepal's sovereignty was recognized, the art and culture they found there no doubt made an impression on the Ranas and their accompanying artists. The most visible example of this is the neoclassical architecture of the Rana palaces. After the Malla kings fell from power in the mid-1700s, the new Shah king, Prithvinarayan Shah, patronized Newari art. Coupled with his distrust for foreigners and their virtual exclusion from Nepal until 1950s, meant that there was little change to the traditional architecture. With the exception of the Rana palaces, the majority of which was built after 1890s, the traditional building materials were used. It followed a common architectural style with the primary material that was wood and earth, either one floor or multi-storied. These neoclassical buildings stood in stark contrast to the traditional architecture. The popularization of this style introduced new building materials, such as lime mortar, and metal structural elements embellished with Greco-Roman details. The colonnaded balconies and hallways, arches and pediments were decorated with stucco work, rosettes, urns, and keystones, all festooned with various floral motifs. Interiors were equally elaborate with Venetian mirrors, crystal chandeliers, and candelabra. Intricately carved wood and stained glass panels embellished the decor. This is ink on paper that Dirgha Man drew when he came to England. This is Royal Pavilion in Brighton. This is Singadarbar, or literally translates to Lion's Palace, and the construction began in 1903 and it ended in 1915. With more than 1,000 rooms, it was the biggest in Asia. And the famous Nepali architects, Kumar and Kishore Narsingha, are said to have drawn inspiration from the Versailles. This is Darbar Hall in Singadarbar, where Prime Minister Chandra Samsher and subsequent rulers held formal meetings and banquets for foreign dignitaries. The interiors are elaborately decorated with Italian marble floors, Venetian mirrors, crystal chandeliers, and intricately carved wood and stained glass panels. This is Kantaghar, which means our house, and it was Nepal's first clock tower built by Prime Minister Bir Samsher in 1894. This clock tower was destroyed in the 1934 earthquake, and a new one stands in its place. The traditional architecture in the valley encompasses of temples and shrines, monasteries and stupas, palaces and ordinary houses, community buildings, fountains, and votive pillars. None can be rigorously categorized as sacred or secular, for all serve both gods and men. The common houses and royal palaces alike have private chapels, shrines, and special places for worship. Community buildings provide amenities for man, but also incorporate shrines and images of God. Even fountains, ponds, and wells are not merely utilitarian. They're usually created as acts of piety and surrounded with sacred symbols and image. This photograph from 1920s of Patan Darbar Square is one such example. These buildings date from the 13th to the 18th century and is considered as one of the finest streetscapes in the world. This is Dattatreya Square in Bhaktapur, and it derives its name from the temple dedicated to the three-headed image of Dattatreya, the conjoined representation of Brahmanical Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Open squares such as these are a place for community interactions and daily life. This is in Indrachok during the annual festival of Indra Jatra, the Akash Bhairav image on the left is taken out of its temple for 7 days on the street for pilgrims to worship. Located in the center of Kathmandu, this is where the old market area is, and its temples and bazaars attract a stream of pilgrims and shoppers. This is the 17th century Kavindrapur temple in Kathmandu Darbar Square. And this is a typical traditional Newari style architecture. The principal building materials include sun-dried bricks, mud mortar, and wood. The wooden doors, windows, struts, and wooden beams are ornately carved. Newar wood carving is known to be one of the most elaborate of its kind, and the Newari wood carving prowess is reflected through the windows called tikija. The tiled roof is made using timber and thick layer of clay, and supported by load-bearing wooden columns. This temple is dedicated to the god of music and was lost in the 1934 earthquake and restored to only 2 stories. This is Keshav Narayan Chowk in Patan Darbar Square, which now houses the Patan Museum. It displays the finest example of carved windows, gateways called toranas, wooden beams, and doorways. Symmetry was a guiding principle and played a crucial role in creating a balanced aesthetic. One way to achieve symmetry was by placing the windows on either side of the central axis, with one window placed along the axis and centered above the main door. Nepali stupas, large and small, ancient and modern, owe their origin to the earth mounds used in antiquity for burial of important persons. Buddha stupa on the outskirts of Kathmandu Valley is credited to King Mandev, who ruled in the beginning of the 5th century. In the course of time, this stupa, like many others, has been repaired, enlarged, and renovated. The dome of Buddha stupa is set on a mandala-shaped platform and supports a finely proportioned pinnacle. Today, it is encircled by multi-story homes, guest houses, monasteries, thangka shops, cafes, and restaurants. The heart of living Buddhism in Kathmandu Valley, Buddha is a center for Tibetan refugees and is revered by Nepal's mountain peoples, including the Sherpas, from their traditional homeland in Solukhumbu. Baisidhara translates to 22 spouts and is located near Balaju in the forest of Nagarjun to the northwest of Kathmandu. Hundreds of such stone-carved water sprouts are found throughout the valley and part of the traditional water supply system, dispensing water to community fountains. Some are still functioning, but many have dried up because of earthquake disruptions, foundations of new buildings, and the ever-changing groundwater levels. The carving on the spout depicts Makara, a mythical aquatic creature made up of part of fish, crocodile, elephant, and lion, to name a few animals involved. Makara is the vehicle of the water goddess Ganga. The large Sikara-style temple in Bungamati. Sikara stems from the Sanskrit word mountain peak. Typically, Sikara is built of stone and brick. Its elemental form is a small square cella surmounted by a tapering tower symbolizing the mountain. The temple is usually elevated on a stepped plinth, followed by a number of molded courses, the cella and the tower with elaborate carvings and statues adorning each level. This temple houses the shrine of Bungadeo. Bungadeo, the god of rain, is worshipped by both Hindus and Buddhists. The deity resides inside the temple for 6 months of the year and spends the rest of his time in Patan. The process of moving Bungadeo back and forth between Patan and Bungamati is one of the most important annual festivals in the valley. This temple collapsed during the 2015 earthquake. This is a view of Kathmandu Darbar not long after the devastating earthquake of 1934. The Royal Palace building on the left shows that it's severely damaged, and the residence of the living goddess on the right appears to be less affected. Hand-drawn trolleys on iron rails were used to transport rubble out of the central area. This is a group portrait of a Newar family, probably taken after, not long after the 1934 earthquake. Men, women, and children are dressed in their traditional clothes, and some women are wearing jewelry on their head called luswa, or golden flower. Young girls are wearing traditional necklaces called tayo. The clothes and jewelry in this photograph suggest that it's an early image untouched by foreign influences. The small children in the last row are blurred, indicated a long exposure time associated with early photography. Photography was accessible to the privileged few, and besides documenting the Rana pomp and glamour, the photographs of daily life and landscape that Dirgha Man took give us a rare glimpse of life at that time. Why they were taken and what was done with them, we don't know. But through these historical photographs, we can gain insight into the daily life, custom, and culture. These photographs provide a visual history that cannot be found in written records alone. This unknown family, taken in the early 1900s, were living in the same courtyard as my family in Bimsanthan. The occasion looks as if it was a celebration. The houses now, they've been rebuilt, but the small stupa on the left still exists. And the house on the left was where Ganesh Man opened his first black and white studio in 1970. When Dirgha Man retired around the mid-1940s, his son Ganesh Man took over his position as a court photographer. He only worked for a few years with the Ranas until 1951, when the rule ended and the Shah kings were reinstated back to power. Nepal then opened up, and many international agencies opened their offices in Nepal. Ganesh Man was employed by United States Agency for International Development, or USAID, as the chief photographer from 1952 to 1970. He extensively documented road buildings, agriculture, forestry, and vocational training throughout Nepal. He made the first aerial photographic survey and was the first person in the country to develop color slides. Ganesh Man was later employed by UNESCO to photograph the landscape and monuments of the historical cities of the Kathmandu Valley. The result is a 2-volume book, Kathmandu Valley, The Preservation of Physical Environment and Cultural Heritage, published in 1975. This publication provides a valuable record of the heritage sites of the valley and is the basis for the designation of Kathmandu Valley as a UNESCO Cultural World Heritage Site in 1979, the first in South Asia. Some of these images are included in the book and also at the exhibition. So by the time Ganesh Man opened his photo studio in the 70s, photography was no longer used by the elite. The backdrops that Dirgha Man painted were used during the Rana time, were repurposed in Ganesh Man's studio. Photography was a modern medium, and people expressed their own ideas of what it meant to be modern citizens. They photographed themselves copying movie stars with their bicycles, and in this case, a radio. Ganesh Man used this backdrop in many of his other portraits. Dirgha Man was a multi-talented artist, and he painted many backdrops that were used in Rana photographs. Here you can see General Krishna Samsher posing on a horse, and on the side you can see one of Dirgha Man's assistant holding the backdrop. Ganesh Man won an award in 1979 for this photograph taken during the annual Matya festival, and he titled it "Changing Fashion of Women in Nepal" for an international photo contest, Women of Asia. Dirgha Man and Ganesh Man's photographs captured the shift in the use of photography. They show how it progressed from during the restrictive Rana period, when access to the outside world and photography were limited to the privileged few, to the post-Rana era, when photography took on a different shape in the private and public sphere. It demonstrates how the state, international agencies, and the public adopted photography to tell a national story of progress. These images document the shift from portraits and political pomp to photographs of development, the land, and the people. Nepal Remembered captures an era that has already gone, revealed in the photographs. This book illustrates the dialogue between the photographer and his subject, and it is my aim today to continue these conversations. This collection is not only my family's heritage, but also an account of Nepal's history. The Chitrakar family history is intertwined with Nepal's political history. As painters, photographers, and cameramen through generations, we have made important contributions. Keeping within the tradition of artists, need of the state, and changes in technology, my family moved from painting to photography and then to videography. My father worked as a cameraman for the national television and is also a third-generation photographer. My brother follows in his forefathers' footsteps as a fourth-generation photographer. Similar to the photographers preserving the heritage, I, as an art historian, continue my family's tradition, not as a visual documentarian, but as a documenter of culture around photographs. So I see this as a continuing legacy. These images present a valuable record for preserving heritage and telling stories of the past. It allows us to explore our history, understand our cultural heritage, and ensure that important events and stories are preserved for future generations. These photographs have especially become important after the 2015 earthquake, as many important sites were destroyed in the earthquake and some irreversible. These photographs remain a testimony to Nepal's heritage site and landscape, and the surviving imagery leaves us a rich visual legacy to derive tremendous amounts of information. Each photograph in the book has an accompanying text identifying people, places, and events. However, dating the photographs have been a challenge, particularly those of landscape. In cases where dates cannot be corroborated, a date range is mentioned rather than a specific date. After much research, I've tried my best to include as much information as I could find about each image. And I would like to end with this photograph to illustrate my point on the difficulty of identifying subjects on some of the photographs, and the hope of mine that through this book, contemporary family members can come forward so we can add that to our archive. So this photograph is included in the book as an unidentified court official and his family. And I got a call from one of the family members, and he was able to give me more information on the photograph and also identify quite a few people in the photograph. So the man in the middle is Colonel Indra Bahadur Karki, and this photograph was taken around 1920s, and the house in the backdrop was destroyed during the 2015 earthquake. I hope that Nepal Remembered will give these photographs a new life and inspire further research. I hope you all get a chance to view the exhibition upstairs in the second floor in the, sorry, what room is it? The council. Okay, so second floor, and you're also. And thank you. And it's on the second floor. And I hope you can also purchase a copy. I hope you purchase a copy of the book. Lastly, I'd like to thank the Royal Asiatic Society for hosting this event and giving me an opportunity to talk. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Dr. Mark Watson just walked in as well, so if you have any questions for him on the book, you can ask him as well. And the exhibition is upstairs. I'll be floating around if you just want to have a conversation with me. Well, thank you so much for coming.
So we're happy to take questions from the floor here as well as from online. Mark, maybe you'd like to join us. Dr. Mark Watson, who is also a contributor in one of the chapters of the book.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I had to go to the hospital. Yeah.
Really quickly, really simple question. And how long after this was published did you get that phone call?
Almost immediately, actually. Yeah. And I've gotten a few other people who have come forward saying, oh, I know this person, so and so. So yeah, I'm hoping, over the course of time, I can sort of add more to our database.
Can I ask you if the archive is mostly in prints or the negatives?
They're all negatives, actually. They're glass plate negatives of different sizes. And we also have the film negatives, 120 and the 35.
So it's remarkable to see that the extent, so it's the continuity between the painting tradition and the photography tradition.
Right.
So it's two small questions related to that. To what extent are the themes of portraiture continued through photography, and also to what extent has the family continued the painting or the artistic tradition alongside photography?
Let me answer the second part of the question. Painting, unfortunately, none. But in terms of photography, so when in the 60s and 70s, people were required to make identification cards and, just for official purposes. So there were a lot of people coming to take your passport photos. Yeah, passport size photos. So we do have a lot of portraits from the 50s, 60s, 70s. But in terms of paintings, my grandfather actually, unfortunately, after taking photographs, he didn't really continue painting as much.
I think it's quite interesting to talk a bit more about the glass plates, because that's actually that much more part of the collection,
Yeah, we have.
participating policy.
Yeah, I mean, so the quality is only in some case, but that is part of that. That's been my job, like, correct. And so it was astonished by the images. Well, it's familiar, what we call the things, there were these. And that's.
Yeah, so many have not survived, that's what's.
Yes, I mean.
It were earthquake, as regarded.
Not just earthquakes. So in the 50s and 60s, nobody sort of knew the importance of these photographs. So my dad, he has 7 siblings, and they all remember washing these glass plates with hot water to take the emulsion out, because people were building new houses and they wanted to use these glass for windows. So I mean, a lot has been lost.
I remember I was working for the BBC in the 70s in Northern Ireland, and all the tapes I used had to be recycled. I had incredible material, but everything had to be recycled.
Yes, I mean, unfortunately, the glass plate negatives are also quite heavy and bulky and quite delicate. So, the whole like process of storing it, cataloging it, that takes quite a lot,
Can I ask about the digital images you captured?
Yeah.
Are those the negative, and are they available online in some repository?
Yes, so we digitized the negatives, and they are available, some on our website. It's called chitrakarlegacy.com, and also at the British Library's Endangered Archives program.
I might point out, my involvement in this was maybe 7 years ago when we sat down with your father, you and your brother. And that was when you were working with the British Library and the Endangered Archives program, which was really kickstarted all of this.
All of this, yes.
Yeah. And it's still going on. Is it purely? Did you want to say something about the Endangered Archives? Because really, this would not have happened unless the British Library had helped us with the digitising.
We're a reactive program, and we make people's workplaces and increase. And we're just so very grateful that there was this decision for
Through the good connections of John Faulkner here.
Oh, yes.
And I think it's a really good example of how publications like this really kickstart further research and study and understanding and appreciation. It's like the beginning of the project.
That's a great slide, actually. That's showing how one image creates so much research and so much more information. It's just publishing one image pushes things forward.
So are there any questions from online? Do you know how that works? Someone will perhaps tell us if they have any questions on the line.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, we currently don't have any questions online. If anyone wants to ask one, now's the time to do it. Please post in chat.
So maybe we can move upstairs and take the photograph.
Yeah, the photograph imageries on the second floor of the big brand. Already before we get.
all of you for making the effort to be here.